You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Buck has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Buck.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Now, our guest for this week's show is real estate expert and director of acquisitions and senior counsel, Max Pastor. Now, Max holds his position at Time Equities Inc., which currently holds in its portfolio approximately 31.1 million square feet of residential, industrial, office, and retail property, including over 4,000 multifamily apartment units. In addition, Time Equities is in various stages of development and pre-development of constructing approximately 1.4 million square feet of various property types, which includes at least 1,400 residential units. With properties in 30 states, 5 Canadian provinces, Germany, the Netherlands, and Antigua, the Time Equities portfolio benefits from a diversity of property types, sizes, and markets. And during our call with Max today, here's what you're going to learn. You're going to learn how he found an interest in real estate at a young age of 7. Yes, 7 years old, an age when most kids are just learning how to ride a bike. You learn how he initially met Francis Greenberger, who's the owner and founder of Time Equity. And also a real quick unique fact here about Francis. Francis syndicated his very first commercial real estate project at the age of 15, okay? Commercial real estate project at the age of 15. 15 years old before he was probably even licensed to drive. I don't know what the age to drive back then was, but that's crazy. That was 52 years ago. You're going to learn how Time Equities has grown from that one office deal 52 years ago that Francis syndicated at the age of 15 into a company, again, that has nearly 32 million square feet of commercial assets in their portfolio. You'll learn how they manage risk by utilizing their coined Trifecta approach to each and every asset that they acquire. You'll learn how they found excellence not only in one asset class, but rather a number of different asset types along with a variety of fee-based service offerings. You'll learn how they maintain a competitive advantage by focusing on properties that can be bought at a very low basis in secondary and tertiary markets. You'll learn the details on a recent case study of a 130,000 square foot Class A office building that was purchased in a secondary market at a 10% cap rate with a 52% occupancy at purchase. Now, within 18 months, they executed on their plan and got the occupancy up to 95%. Now, this was just in the last 2 years, guys. So this wasn't back in like 2012 when there were a ton of 10% cap deals on A-class office property, okay? This is within the last 2 years. And again, within 18 months, they took it from 52% all the way up to 95%. You're going to learn the simple concept of negative leverage versus positive leverage and how to shield yourself from future risk associated with pricing corrections. You're going to learn about the key time management strategies that Max uses to ensure a highly productive workday and much, much more. And so with that, guys, I'm excited to get on to the show with Max. But before we do, just a few quick housekeeping items. First and foremost, like I do every week, I like to share one personal best and one professional best from the prior week. Personal best. This past weekend, we actually celebrated my 2 boys' birthdays, okay? My son Julian turned 3 on October 4th, and my oldest son Jackson will be turning 6 on October 18th. And so Jackson has not officially had his 6th birthday yet. However, at this age, I do think that it's still acceptable to combine both parties, and the boys absolutely loved it. You know, we invited a few of their best friends from their schools. Jackson's in kindergarten and Julian's in a preschool, I guess you could say, or daycare. And so we invited their friends there from schools, which they typically don't hang out with outside of school, right? And so it was kind of cool to have their best friends over to our home. We had a big water slide and a slip and slide and a bunch of other cool things set up outside. For those folks that are listening to this show in a cold environment, Florida this past week was still like 85 degrees. And so all the kids are running around in their bathing suits. They are swimming in the pool. Again, we had a big inflatable slip and slide thing, and it was just a great day, a beautiful day, lots of great memories being made with friends and family, and also the boys there. So as far as professional best, last Thursday and Friday, I actually had the pleasure to spend two days with three great friends of mine who also happen to be brilliant real estate investors. Now, we actually started this little mastermind about a year ago, and we typically meet every 4 months now. So we've met 3 times now over the past year. Now, these guys, these close friends of mine, they come from all different walks of life, with 2 of them being trained in the institutional world, with Ivy League educations, and the other one, he's an elite military veteran that is absolutely killing it in the self-storage space. Now, the other 2 guys that came from the institutional background, their focus is in retail and then also medical office. Now, needless to say, the amount of brain power that got shared in those 2 days was absolutely astounding, and always look forward to spending 1 or 2 days with those guys and just really working on the business, not in the business, right? You always got to try to remove yourself from the daily grind of what you got going on and step backwards and look at the bigger picture. And, it's always interesting, the unique perspective that I gain when I walk away from one of those weekends, right? You start discussing different challenges and roadblocks that you're facing in your business and looking for feedback from the group. They can step outside the bubble, step outside your shoes and see it from a completely different perspective. And the amount of incredible feedback that I received and that we gave to each other is just amazing. It's really what helps you propel your business and grow it to the next level. Moving on from that, guys, if you love what we're doing here at the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, please be sure to go subscribe to the show and then also take a moment to leave a review and rating on iTunes. It's really how we grow the show. It's how we attract awesome guests like Max, who we're having on here today. They go on there and they want to see that people are reviewing the show, that we, that folks are appreciating the content that we're sharing, right? They don't want to go into a show that has 0 reviews. They want to see that the reviews are fresh and that people are still listening and tuning into the words of myself and also the guests that we have on the show each and every week. So again, iTunes, leave that review. It takes a moment to do so. I always like to give a shout out each and every week as well to someone that's taking the time to go leave that review. And so this one was left by Carter Martini. I hope I pronounced that last name correctly. And Carter says, as a young professional in commercial real estate, I've become obsessed with learning about the intricacies of everything related to real estate investing. Kevin covers multiple different asset classes and a wide range of topics that all tie back to becoming a successful investor. Very relevant and fresh episode content with distinguished guests. Huge amounts of value has been added in my career portfolio through his audio awesomeness. So again, that was Carter Martini from St. Louis. So Carter, thank you so much for taking the time to leave that review. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Guys, lastly, before we get on with it, just want to remind you of the free 30-minute phone call that I offer each and every Friday. You can schedule that call by going to my website, kevinbupp.com. You can get signed up. And this is where you and I can connect and talk about anything and everything regarding real estate investing, okay? Anything your heart desires, go to my website, sign up for that call. There's no ulterior motive here. I won't try to pitch you a sales program or try to sell you coaching or anything like that, okay? This is a way for me to connect and give back. And so I look forward to connecting with you, hopefully in the future. And now, without further ado, let's get on to the part of the show that you've been waiting for. Here is Max Pastor. Alrighty, guys, it is my honor to introduce my guest for today's show, Director of Acquisitions and Senior Counsel of Time Equities Inc., Max Pastor. Max, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me on, and look forward to doing this. Yeah,
very much so. I was looking forward to this show here for the last couple of weeks since we've had it scheduled, and very interested in learning a little bit more about your background, as well as the company, Time Equities. Time Equities has been around for over 50 years now, and so I know that we're going to go down a couple different paths here today, but I guess before we get into the meat and potatoes, Max, what I love is just to take a little bit more of a personalized approach here in the beginning and give you a few minutes to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, your background, how you got into this industry, and ultimately how your feet landed with Time Equities.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. So I got into real estate probably the old-fashioned way. I was generally born into it, in a sense, not with great wealth or ownership, but my father and grandfather were real estate service providers. So if you see the painting behind me, it's of the interstate highway bridges in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I'm from. And my grandfather was actually charged with procuring the real estate to build the interstate highway system in that part of the country. So he was charged with actually going through Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee and negotiating to buy rights of way from landowners to create the highway system. So he taught me a lot of skills as a young child and brought me with him on a lot of his regional travels and really taught me how to negotiate and got me interested in real estate. And by the time I was 6 or 7 years old, easements, rights of way, servitudes were things that were in my vocabulary. So maybe I was somewhat of a real estate and legal savant from a young age. And that really is what got me interested in real estate initially. Which sort of coincides with Time Equities, and I'll circle back to that, is that Time Equities was founded by Francis Greenberger approximately 52 years ago. And Francis also started the company at a very young age and actually bought his first building when I believe he was about 15 years old.
Wow.
And syndicated the deal, and he goes into great detail about it, and that was the birth of Time Equities in his book, Risk Game. So he was also somebody from a young age who had tremendous business acumen, and it's really been an honor to work with him throughout my career. How I started at Time Equities is after graduating from undergrad, I went to law school in New York City at a school, Benjamin and Cardozo School of Law. And actually within that building, it's an office condominium. Half of it's owned by the law school and half by Francis and Time Equities. So as luck would have it, one summer day, they had a posting for hiring an intern. And this was about 16 years ago. And I walked up my resume to Time Equities, turned it in, had an interview, and that was actually my first job, was a legal clerk for Time Equities and working for Francis. So I've done a couple of things in between when I started there, and I actually left for a while and worked at a large international law firm and ran a private real estate company in New York. And about 5 years ago, Francis convinced me to come back to Time Equities and co-lead a acquisitions and asset management team that basically invests all over the country in value-add real estate opportunities. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we get into it.
Yeah, fantastic.
So that's my background.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. And in that little condensed period of time, there's a lot to unpack there. And so what we do know about you, Max, is that probably during like your 8th grade book reports, you were giving reports on surveys and easements and different real estate jargon, and probably confusing the heck out of not only the students, but also the teachers in class. That's fantastic, and I'm going to make a note, guys, of the book. In fact, Max, if you would, please repeat the name of the book that Francis that he had written as well, because that sounds very intriguing. I'd love to learn a little bit more about his history and his story of especially syndicating a deal when he was 15 years old. That's quite impressive.
Sure. The book is called Risk Game, and it's by Francis J. Greenberger. I think it was published in 2017 or 2018. It's a quick read and full of lots of good advice and some great real estate stories.
Okay, fantastic. So I'd love to chat about the company itself. I mean, we know 52 years ago, Francis did his first deal. He was 15 years old. Just from a generalized perspective, what was the core focus of the company 52 years ago? And ultimately, how has that changed over the years from that very first deal?
Sure. Well, the first office deal that Francis really got involved with was he was running his father's publishing agency, and they had too much office space, and he sublet some office space. This was also about 52 years ago. And in doing so, he realized he was making, more money off the subleasing of the space than perhaps the business was producing. And thus was born the idea of getting into real estate. And that's where sort of led into syndicating and buying his first building and ultimately building a company. And I think a company like Time Equities isn't built overnight. but it's really sticking true to your core investing values. So when we look at what we're buying and how we're operating, we generally, and I always think of three things, which I ultimately call the Time Equities Trifecta, is can we buy things at a low purchase price, at a above market cap rate, and with room to grow either occupancy wise or in our rental rate wise? Because those three things taken together will put us into a good position. And really, Francis has employed that strategy, and as far as being in multiple product types in diverse regions throughout his career. And it's really what has given the company, both Francis and Time Equities, the ability over time to have a very high batting average, and really look at things in an innovative way. Because what we're focused on is really growing cash flow as opposed to investing simply for short-term holds and capital appreciation. It's more of a long-term perspective.
Got it. No, that's quite interesting. And I'd love to speak to the diversity of the company from an asset-based perspective. I mean, I found some statistics on the website, and I don't know if these have changed, but right now it states that your portfolio is approximately made up of 31 million square feet of residential, industrial, office, and retail property, and more than 4,000 multifamily apartment units. In addition to that, you guys are in various stages of development and pre-development of more than 1.4 million square feet of various property types, which includes more than 1,400 residential units. In addition to that, you're in 30 different states, 5 Canadian provinces, Germany, the Netherlands, Antigua, and the list goes on and on. And so I'd love to get a general sense of exactly what that means for you, your role in the company. You're director of acquisition. So just speaking to the different statistics there of all the different aspects of real estate you guys are involved in, how does your role play into all that?
Sure. Well, let me first start by maybe taking you through a little bit of the macro structure of the company, and then coming back to my role within that. So we are a full service real estate investment company, and we have our own acquisitions and asset management department, our own legal department, and our own equity department that services all the needs of Time Equities. The equity that we invest comes both from our internal sources, as well as we have a broker dealer fund that co-invests alongside of us. So I'm one of the directors of acquisitions. We generally have 3 to 4 teams that go around and source acquisition opportunities and asset management opportunities for us. Some of the teams have expertise in retail or international investing. Others have expertise on a nationwide portfolio. For instance, where I concentrate my efforts on it is leading a team that invests in office, industrial, multifamily, and mixed use value add opportunities throughout the United States. And some other groups, like I said, specialize in retail or the Netherlands and Germany. And we also have a development arm. Some of the notable projects the development arm have recently produced is 50 West Street in Lower Manhattan, and they're currently building a high-rise on South Michigan Avenue called 1000 South Michigan in Chicago.
Very interesting. So I'd love to, from a perspective of the trifecta target that you guys go for with all the different acquisitions, I'd love to get a sense from you as to how times have changed and, bringing us to today's period of time, a very competitive landscape. Everyone's out there chasing yield. What major differences have you noticed from, let's just back up, 2 or 3 years to today as we record this show, and how are you guys still staying incredibly active in a much more competitive landscape as far as buyers are concerned?
Sure. Well, we're certainly out there looking at all the deals and scouring the country and the planet for opportunities. But there's no doubt that with interest rates being as low as they are and capital flowing as freely as it does, the competition level is intense for assets. So generally, we have taken a defensive strategy even though we've been very active and we've stayed true to our core. So those assets have been harder to come by, but by staying persistent and leveraging relationships, whether it be with banks or other developers, you can find deals that work for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer, and Francis, I think, has taught me over the years that really the money is made on your buy.
Yes.
So you need to stay true to yourself. And as we go through different cycles, if your basis in the property is low, you will be protected ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If rents fall, you can still have a positive return. Mm-hmm. So what we've done is a lot of the capital that's come in has really looked at core markets. And we've found that those markets have really been bid up to a level where it doesn't make a lot of sense from a leverage perspective to invest there if you're investing long term. So we've really been most successful, at least speaking for my team, when we've gone into secondary or even sometimes tertiary markets and been able to buy well, and execute our business plan. Mm-hmm. And I can give you a couple of examples if you'd like. Or
yeah, that'd be fantastic. That'd be fantastic.
Sure. So about 2 years ago, we went down to Roanoke, Virginia, which has a nice but small CBD. And we bought from basically a property that had been taken over by its lender. It was 160,000 square foot CBD B+, A- office building that we bought for about $60 a foot. It was 52% occupied, and we bought it for about a 10 cap going in on the purchase price. Now, your return after reserving for tenant improvements or leasing commissions is lower than that, but it gave us a great cushion going in. Mm-hmm. We had a very solid lease-up plan and improvement plan to the building, and we felt good about the market and sort of the local team we had assembled there. And within 18 months, we were able to get the building up to about 95% occupancy and execute a financing of the property because we had purchased it all cash and returned essentially about 70% of the capital back to our investors, plus had a very high leveraged return on the remaining cash in the deal. So that's really the type of transactions from a value add perspective that we look to do. But, you don't find them every day, and you have to dig a little bit deeper, both in markets and an effort to find those and source those opportunities.
I'd love to get a better understanding, like on that particular deal. I always like to dissect, what went wrong, with the last owner, that property, right? That's part of your due diligence process when you're looking at an asset. What ultimately went wrong, and can we do it better? What exactly was that from the, before it got taken back by the lender? What do you think went astray on that deal at some point, in the last, 5-10 years? What was it? And then ultimately, how did you gain the confidence that that your team would be able to execute concisely on that plan? And again, going from 52% to 95% in a matter of 18 months on, what is that? That's essentially, you guys are leasing up somewhere, 70,000? I can't do quick math like that, but 70,000 square feet of space fairly quickly, and basically a year and a half. That's a lot.
Going back to when I was talking about low basis, and not to harp on this point, but what happens in a lot of these situations, and we're actually doing a deal like this now, very similar to the one I described to you, we're going to be closing in 2 weeks, is that we buy it from somebody who had a much higher basis in the property, and they purchased it at a very high dollars per square foot. And it was over leveraged. And what that does to the property is that if rents have gone down, you can't really agree on those rents and bring people into your building, because even if you do, you can't pay your debt service sometimes. And also what coincides with that is often the ownership group, once the property gets distressed, because maybe a large tenant left, that there's not capital to put in for tenant improvements and leasing commissions to attract tenants. So what happens? The property basically sits there with vacancy, and you can't really execute deals where the market is, and there's not capital available to entice tenants to come to your building. So, it's one of those situations where sometimes the third investor in is the one who makes the money in the deal, unfortunately. The second investor is the bank. The first one was the developer. So by coming in at a low basis, we have flexibility generally on where we can rent properties relative to the market and our competition. And we also make sure that within our capital stack, we have enough funds available for tenant improvements and leasing commissions and incentives to make our building the most attractive in the market if somebody's looking for space.
And we don't have to get too granular here, but was that essentially that office property? Was that a securitized loan that went into a term default based on the occupancy, something that was maybe purchased back in like 2006 at the height of the last cycle?
You're precisely right,
okay.
and that's so it was a securitized lender, and it was somebody who had a high basis, and that's what happens. The good news is with the securitized lenders that you get very good terms. But also just by nature of the product, when you get into a sticky situation like that, it's not easy you don't have a lending relationship with your ultimate note holder. So it's hard to say, hey, we need another X number of dollars to make improvements to the building. That product doesn't allow for that.
Yeah. I know that there was, in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of dialogue revolving around a lot of those CMBS loans that were created back in, let's say 04, 05, 06 that were ultimately coming on their 10-year term, and that there was going to be this massive implosion of securitized debt. And I don't know if it's really, maybe you guys see something that we don't. You dabble in that space a lot more than we do. But what have you seen? I mean, is there opportunity? Is there an abundance of opportunity there today, or did it not really play out as much as what we thought it was going to, as far as the amount of defaults?
I think there were selective opportunities, and beyond the building I was talking to you about, we did have several other buying opportunities and transactions that we closed. However, I too agree with you. I never saw the onslaught of so much available product that was originated in that 05, 06, 07 time frame. And maybe that's because things got very bad, and then ultimately they started to improve, and people were able to work them out. We're not the most active note buyer. We do it occasionally, but we generally buy fee product or fee simple title to assets. Okay.
I'd love to get a sense from you, since the company 52 years, you guys have been through multiple recessionary periods of time. And obviously you haven't been with the company for all 52 years, but I'm sure that you've been there long enough that historically how things have changed or ebbed and flowed within the company. Is there certain strategies that you guys take into consideration, other than just buying at a low basis on all new acquisitions or all current acquisitions that are in the pipe? Are there additional strategies that you guys put more of an emphasis on? For example, your fee side of the company, your fee-based services that you offer. As you go into these different peak cycles, is it something to where you guys make a slight shift over to growing that side of the business that typically finds a growth period during times of distress, or do you just keep moving forward status quo?
Well, that's an interesting question, and there's a couple of different answers for it. The fee part of the business really services our platform, and isn't necessarily designed as a income generator that would carry the company through a recessionary period. So what would carry us through that period is we continue to be defensive and conservative in our analysis and underwriting. And we talked about low basis, so I won't go back to that. But there's another concept that Francis taught me very early on and has really served me well throughout real estate investing. And that's the concept of positive versus negative leverage. And if I could take, quick 10 seconds to explain what I mean, is if you can borrow money right now, let's say on multifamily, let's pick a number, say 4%.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to buy a 4.5% cap rate in New York, ultimately after I pay my expenses and things like that, at best case, my leverage is going to be flat, or I'm actually going to be, with amortization, paying more in leverage costs than I'm earning on the property. And that's a bad situation to be in when cycles turn. Whereas if we go out of market and we buy something with an 8% return and we're paying 6% in loan costs all in, we have positive leverage. And that means that things can get worse before we have any risk of not being able to service our debt. So I think it's a key fundamental, especially as we think we're late in the cycle. It's not a time, not that there ever is a time, but you need to be very sensitive to having a negative leverage scenario.
Do you guys typically have a rule of thumb for, amount of spread between, current debt that might be available for that, particular asset given its current situation, and also what the actual going in cap rate is? Do you have a rule of thumb that you go with, or is it a case-by-case basis?
Sure. It's somewhat of a case-by-case basis, but there's a sort of fundamental rule that we try to follow. And that is the cap rate can be a little bit deceiving. It's good as a broker's number or a talking point for relative valuation. But really what we like to look at is what is our unleveraged return based on our project costs. So the cap rate's based on the purchase price. But if we're doing a value add scenario or we have some capital work to do going in, we like to take our total cost and then look at what our return is after applying a reasonable reserve for capital items and vacancy and items like that. So what we really try to shoot for going in is a 7% unleveraged return on our capital stack. And 7 is a good number to us because we feel like it's a good baseline going in, but also it gives us room to positively leverage the property from early on. And beyond the initial 7, we look to have growth, but that's where we like to start. Okay,
fantastic. Well, Max, I'd love to shift gears if we could, and there's a few other things I'd like to hit on here before we work towards wrapping up the show. One of the big ones would be, being that you're an active cog, a very key cog in a fairly large organization. I'm not exactly sure, the size of the staff there at Time Equities, but it's all relative. And really, this question is based around you being the director of acquisitions. Obviously, you've got, I'm assuming, a number of folks that report to you. So you're overseeing a strategic team in that sense. What are some of the specific time management strategies that you feel have had a large impact in your life and overall success that you implement on a regular basis?
Sure. I think one of the key things I try to do every day is compartmentalize. And I've recently started this in the last several years, and it's really blocking out time to do specific tasks during the day while still allowing some elasticity to manage things that come up that are unplanned. But early on in my career, I remember getting 200 and 300 emails a day and responding to everything or trying to in real time. And one of the simplest time management techniques that I've started utilizing is scheduling time to respond to emails and correspondence just like I would meetings, and not doing it in real time because it can really sidetrack you. So I think being present, doing in your task, blocking off time for specific things and really focusing on those items during that time and not getting distracted is how I've been able to compartmentalize things.
Email is my arch nemesis. It really is. I still haven't figured out how to absolutely master that. I do share in the concept of compartmentalizing the email and just really focusing on a set period of time. And like all of us, we fall out of habits, and I tend to find myself, a few days into a week, and I'm like, what am I doing here? I just spent 2 hours, buried in the trenches of email, and
Right.
I promised myself that would not happen, and found that I get pulled away from things that are much more important, things that are actually helping progress the company forward. Whereas a lot of these emails, you're just being reactive. You're in a reactive state nonstop, and that's not healthy. That's not really a growth aspect of the business. Not the best place to be spending your time for the most part. And so I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one that has that channel.
The other thing I do is usually the hardest or most important task, do it first.
Yes.
In your day, and try to schedule it easier as it goes on, or leave your less important tasks to the
That's
end.
an interesting strategy, and that's one. It's fairly common. You hear about it quite often, but it's very hard to maintain in practice. And the reason being is that it's once we start checking things off of whatever that proverbial to-do list is, right? However you have it formatted, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel accomplished. However, that big item could be something that you might not even get really completed in that one day. And, so I find a lot of folks fall into that habit of at least maybe putting one or two easy things in front of that big item so they can feel that no matter what, they got something accomplished in that given day. And I think that's that is the death trench that some fall into when trying to utilize that strategy. But no, I feel you.
That's true.
With that big beast, right? The 800-pound gorilla at the beginning of the day. And ideally, what I have found, I've got 2 young boys, and so it's a little more challenging in my household to find that quiet time in the morning before I come into the office. It's incredibly challenging. However, I do find that if I can get up and have an hour of focus before the house wakes up, right? Before things start going crazy and food starts flying around the kitchen and things of that nature, that I start chunking away at that 800-pound gorilla, whatever it might be. Or maybe it's not even actually making progress on it, however, really planning for it, or the night before planning how I'm going to attack that beast of a task. Again, just trying to knock out the biggest one. That's the most important. That's really going to push the company or your department forward, right? That's the most important part of each and every daily activity that we have that's work-related is growing the company, pushing it forward, gaining momentum. So I love to, Max, I love to enter in what we call the lightning round. And these are basically a collection of 6 different questions, very, very straightforward questions that we're seeking very straightforward, simple answers on. And so if you're ready for it, man, I'd love to roll into it.
Let's roll.
All right.
Let's do it. First
and foremost, your biggest fear. What is it?
My biggest fear, I went to the Ohio State University. It's losing to the University of Michigan in football.
I love it. One biggest regret.
Biggest regret that I didn't do some criminal defense attorney work immediately out of law school. It was always an interest, and I didn't get the opportunity to do it.
Okay. Most influential business book.
I would have to say Risk Game by Francis Greenberger. Right. But recently I also read a book by Erez Cohen called Real Estate Titans. And I was able to glean some good lessons from various successful people in the industry by reading it.
And who was the author of that one again?
Erez Cohen.
Erez Cohen. Guys, I'll put that in the show notes for you as well. All right. Outside of the daily work grind, what do you do to decompress?
I love to play tennis, which is a great opportunity to decompress, hang out with friends and family. I have a daughter and a son, so I'm pretty much a family guy. But when I can, I like to get out on the court and hit it around a bit.
Okay. The one thing you can't live without?
The one thing I can't live without. Unfortunately, I'd have to say it's my iPhone, but
Hope your wife's not listening to this. You should see your wife, right? No,
of course.
Just kidding. I'll make sure she doesn't get it. No, in any event. Last one here in the lightning round. What would your plan be if one day that you decided no longer you wanted to do what you're doing here today? I think I know the answer, but go for it.
Sure. Well, criminal defense attorney I talked about, but other than that, I would love to own and run sort of a yoga and tennis studio.
Interesting.
In retirement. I think that would be a sort of great mix of activities that would be enjoyable.
Talk to me about the blend of those two. I'm assuming that you're obviously active in tennis. You're also probably active in yoga, being that you'd love to open up a studio.
I aspire to be.
Yeah,
but I'm not as much as I would like to. But I think the stretching and the flexibility. It benefits you in tennis and basically in overall health. And it's two things. If I had infinite amounts of time, I would love to do both of those more.
Very interesting. Have you done, I don't know how long you've been practicing yoga, but have you noticed any type of added benefit to just your daily work life per se, as far as your mental clarity, energy, what have you?
Yeah, recently it's not definitely tied to yoga, but I started utilizing an app called Headspace, which I know a lot of people utilize from time to time. And I found that just taking 5 to 7 minutes a day to do one of their meditations or focuses has actually helped sort of in compartmentalizing and sharpening sort of my acumen, both business and personal, throughout the day. And it's I've been quite surprised at how much a little bit of time can actually improve your overall performance. It was quite mind-opening.
Yeah, so Headspace is the app. Okay,
yep.
Fantastic. Well, Max, you shared lots of great golden nuggets here today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And what I'd like to ask of you is if you had just one final golden nugget of advice or wisdom still laying around somewhere on your desk there that you could leave with our listeners today that may inspire and motivate them as they progress in their own real estate investing career, what would that one last golden nugget be?
Sure. The golden nugget would be, and we talked about it, is you make money on the buy and have a low basis. And combine that with the opportunity for positive leverage, and I think you've greatly enhanced your ability to have, or likelihood to have, a successful investment.
Yeah, fantastic. I love every bit of it. Folks, if you'd love to learn more about what Max and his team have going on, you can go visit their website, which is timeequities.com. Again, that's timeequities.com. Max, is there anything else that you'd like to leave with us here today before we get on? I think we covered a lot of ground. I think we discussed a lot of great things, lots of golden nuggets there, not just that last one, just tons of great things that you share with our community here today. Is there anything else that you feel might be relevant about yourself, about Time Equities, or anything in general that you'd like to share before we roll out?
Well, certainly if anybody's interested in getting to know Time Equities better, or our investment strategy, they can feel free to reach out to me directly or go to our website. I really thank you for having the opportunity to come on your show today. It was great, and hopefully I provided people with a little bit of advice that they can use and help better themselves. So thanks a lot for the opportunity, Kevin.
Fantastic. Thank you, Max, for coming. Really appreciate it. And thank each and every one of you for tuning into today's show. And until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bupp, wishing you huge success.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com, and we'll see you next Monday morning.